Which one what do you want to do first? Do you want to do your baby last, or you want to do my baby last?
I think I was the big winner. I think I won the media
All
tour.
right, let's do Gunbreaker then. Let me pull up all the tooltips. I'm pulling up the old ones too, just to compare levels. I think I got them all memorized though.
Gunbreaker is the tank for somebody that is trying to learn tanking and was a melee DPS. It's got a
Yes.
nice, big, clean rotation. And as somebody who's never tanked and they're going to learn to tank and they've never done a rotation based job, like a heavily big, long, lengthy rotation based job, it's their first MMO, they haven't done a lot of RPGs. Gunbreaker is like, how many buttons? Like, I called it Button
A
Breaker
lot
when
of
I first
buttons.
released. I was like, this
A
just
lot of buttons.
cannot fit on a bar. It's got a lot going on, but they cleaned that up.
They did.
It didn't
They
take that
did.
much. A small change made a massive difference in how casual it felt on the keyboard.
All they had to do is PvP it. Now I don't even think it takes up 3 whole hotbars,
It's a little
which
more
is great.
complicated than PvP because the total combination got one button longer,
Sure.
right? Because you gained a
Sure.
continuation, but we
We gained a
removed
continuation.
we removed 2 buttons to do it. So we're using less buttons to do a longer rotation.
They also added an additional ammo button. So in terms of new buttons we have to press, well, we only have one.
Now the
But in
new
terms of things that were upgraded, there were a few things. The nice thing is our new continuation is still just the continuation button. That's it. And now our whole Gnashing Fang combo is just going to be one button as well, which is great.
back and forth, continuation. You got a
Yeah,
global
1 2
cooldown
1 2 1
button
2.
and an off global button. Back and forth, back and forth.
Yep. Yep.
It's like repeat 3 times or something like that. Which is like I'll have to count it because I count fell cleaves, so it'll be like 1, 2,
Oh,
3.
absolutely.
Like I don't care what they're called.
Absolutely.
They're like, oh, it's changing names and they're changing potencies. And it doesn't matter. I have to do it all 3 times anyway. So 1, 2, 3. Okay.
Yep.
Yeah. So mitigations didn't feel like it changed as much on this job. So just starting with what like didn't change is a lot of the mitigation on this job felt like a lot of these tooltips were identical. Did I miss something in there? Like No Mercy, Camouflage, Nebula, Heart of Light, Heart of Stone, all felt like I didn't see anything change.
Like they didn't change at all. Well, Super Bowl-eyed went up to 10 seconds.
Yes. Yes.
No, camouflage stayed the same. Didn't expect that to change anyways. Nebula stayed the same. Didn't expect that to change either. Aurora got a second charge of its regen with no recast timer, so we can use it quickly either on, you and I for co-tanking or 2 DPS or whatever. So maybe we're recovering from a bunch of deaths and our red mage just res 3 people, but our healer doesn't have the healing.
Which
We got
I
a little
love
bit to work with
charges.
that.
We already talked about that
Yes.
in Dark Knight.
Yes.
That's wonderful.
Charge system is great.
Charge is great.
We did get a little bit of a buff to our Heart of Stone as it upgrades to Heart of Corundum, which is
Okay.
fantastic because we are going to have the ability to still get 15% mitigation, still get the shield from Brutal Shell, get Clarity of Corundum, which reduces damage by an additional 15% for the first 4 seconds. So now we're a little bit stronger than Paladin, unless Paladin uses Rampart or Sentinel, in which case their intervention will be equal. And then we also get Catharsis of Corundum, which is an XCOG effect when you go under 50% of your max HP. And
My
I didn't.
gosh.
It doesn't have a potency attached to it, but upon testing it, it looked to be about 400 potency.
So I have trouble
Which is
reading mitigation as tooltips
Sure.
and understanding what it means when I was just getting to use it on a dummy because the content we got was synced, and so mitigation wise, I didn't get to try. And so hearing you
Hey,
say
you're
all
not
this, so
taking
like,
damage from a dummy.
so when I looked at mitigation, I was just looking at like total number of tooltips, and I was like, okay, we got this many mitigation abilities. A big bulk of them did not change, and then there's a handful that are new. And like Heart of Corundum got like a book. It just got like, hey, it does all the
Yep.
like it. The tooltip.
Hey, we're doing everything.
It's almost like the gauge where it has like a little scroll bar. Like it's just like, hey, we're just gonna do every mitigation that's ever existed.
Let's check the mitigation. Flat damage reduction. Brutal Shell shield, so now we have a bubble. Additional flat mitigation. And healing. What's missing? Maybe a coffee?
A dot.
Yeah.
Something offensive. So
And the nice thing about the heal on it as well is you don't have to go under 50% of your max HP for it to heal you. When the effect expires, it'll just...
It
it'll
could
work
give
as
a
well.
cartridge, because I will say for the fact that they upped us to 3 cartridges, I felt more cartridge hungry now than I did at 2 cartridges.
You wanted to do all of that
Yeah,
and grant you a
yeah. I got 3
cartridge?
cartridges, and I was like, well, now I
Okay.
want 4
Well, now I
cartridges.
want them.
Like, game hasn't even come out yet, and I already want 4 cartridges. Three's not enough. Um, because double down, double down is like it's my favorite new tank ability.
What I'm gonna do? I'm gonna double down on Gunbreaker
Double down
for Endwalker.
is my of all of the new abilities added to the tanks. Double down is my single favorite.
Oh, me too. You're gonna jump in the air and just blast at the ground and hit everything around
It's
for a
it's
massive amount of potency too. A
it's
massive amount.
awesome. Now, what is odd about Double Down is it's a 60-second cooldown, and Bloodfest remained at 90 seconds. So
Yes.
rotationally, it's going to work. You're going to get those charges, I assume, from Bloodfest every other time. Or how does that work? How does
Every other
like
time.
me rotationally? Like
You-
I'm like, am I doing it? Is there really a rotation A and a rotation B? And I'm this is are the charges coming from somewhere different every other usage?
There are a number of ways you can play Gunbreaker. It's very versatile. You can run any number of skill speeds, and the way you do your opener is going to basically set the pace for how the rest of your fight's going to go. Bloodfest should never be held for another No Mercy window unless it's like, very end of the fight, your potion's coming up, whatever. But that's basic users, right? You're just like, hey, I want to get in there. What do I do? Bloodfest on cooldown, as long as you have 0 cartridges when it comes up. Now, this is going to change your mentality a little bit, and this is something I had to work on in the media tour since I'm so ingrained in Gunbreaker. It's my baby. It's my favorite. So I'm doing the regular rotation, and I'm like, all right, I have 2 cartridges now. I need to burst strike so I don't overcap. And then I'm like, wait a minute. I have an extra hole in there I could fill with another ammo. I have 3, right? So now you're like, I don't have to do as many burst strikes in between. So you'll naturally go back up to 3 by the time you get into your next No Mercy window, which means you'll always have that 2 spare for double down plus 1 for a Gnashing Fang. So every No Mercy window is going to have those buttons in it.
Okay.
And if your double down is ever not in No Mercy, you have probably made a grave error.
There are only a handful of jobs where like the rotation tells me if I've really screwed something up. Paladin and Shadowbringers does it by saying, hey, you messed up and you suck. Yep. Astro does it by like, you run out of mana. Like if you're not applying your cards and you're not using Lucid, like if you just get distracted and forget about cards, you just run out of mana. And you're like,
yep.
Oh, I must have been doing something gravely wrong. Ninja does it by putting bunny ears over you. So like every job has its own way of like telling you screwed up.
That's correct.
And
Gunbreaker plays off of a lot of 30s and 60s. So if you're in your burst window and you don't have those buttons, you did something.
And Gunbreaker lines up so cleanly that it's like every 30 seconds you have a chance to redeem yourself.
Yep.
And if you screwed up, why don't you just spend 30 seconds thinking about what you did, and then you can try again.
Then don't do it again.
Don't do it again. So like I've enjoyed Gunbreaker as a tank. It is so far like 2 Shadowbringers. I have found that it is a job that it feels overwhelming till it clicks, and then it immediately feels fun. And it's all at once. Like the moment it clicks all at once. The nice thing is that unlike Paladin, like you don't have to get it right the first time. It can click, and then you can have a regression, and you can mess it up, and then you can just click again. And so it is a job that like it rewards you for the click, and then you just get to where you're doing more correct rotations in a row, without messing up. And I think that the continuation add to Burst Strike feels like that adds to that. I liked it. I don't know if you agree with that, but I feel that the additional continuation was a good thing.
I think having more damage is great. It changed the way we need to do a few things, though.
Okay.
It definitely changed the way we need to do a few things. So normally, let's say the boss is going away and your last button is your Gnashing thing, right? Now, Burst Strike with that continuation is stronger than the starter for Gnashing Fang. The other buttons are stronger after, but that particular instance, let's say you're going into your burst and you're No Mercy. Right. Or maybe Trick Attack is going up and you're like, I'm going to Burst Strike before Gnashing Fang because Gnashing is stronger. Now you just have to reverse your mentality on that. It's like, all right, buffs are about to go up. I need to Gnashing first and then Burst because Burst Strike's stronger. So that was something we used to manipulate before. Now we have to unmanipulate that. The other thing is let's say you're in your burst combo, right? You're main tanking. The boss needs to be moved for a mechanic,
Mm-hmm.
and you're in your Gnashing Fang combo, and you have so many weaves, and it's hard to pull the boss with continuation. Before you saved a cartridge, and you used a burst strike, and then you had all the time to move it because you didn't have anything to press after burst strike. Now you have to continuation, so now you don't have that little training wheel on your bike anymore. So now we have to play a little bit better, play a little bit smarter, maybe move the boss during our double down or during our sonic break, because our options just changed.
So it just became more of a melee DPS.
It became more of a melee DPS, and the skill ceiling for tanking, I wouldn't say playing Gunbreaker, but tanking while on Gunbreaker went up.
I think the reason that I've been so positive on the tank changes in general is that it feels like these skill ceilings went up across the board without penalizing where I'm at. Or
And that's
penalizing
great
where I've
because
been.
we want to have fun.
Because my
We don't want to be
concern
bored.
has been that to up the ceiling, they have to up the floor. And so I see a whole bunch of new tanks fall down, and I see a bunch of, like, we're going to gap out on tanks between 6.0 and 6.1 because a handful of people, roughly 99% of the population, are going to be on Reaper and Sage. And so there just aren't going to be tanks. And so closing the door on new tanks is a bad idea for all the roulettes that we're going to run. That's a terrible idea. We need tanks. But at the same time, like, my complaint going into Shadowbringers, I haven't talked to you about this. Going into Shadowbringers, I was really mad about tank stance.
I was really upset because that, as far as farm goes, you're probably just not in tank stance, right? But when you're in progression, when you're in dungeons, when you're in situations where you have to recover, tank stance not only offered the opportunity to kind of optimize yourself, right, but also mitigation, right? You had Inner Beast on Warrior, that was so good. I loved Inner Beast.
It just felt cheap. As somebody that's trying to get better at the game, it just felt like somebody came in and said, "Let me just do it for you," and that doesn't
like, all right, you turn this button on and you're good, kid.
like it's literally
and
like
at the same time they made it easier for the DPS, right? Because they took away enemies, so DPS didn't have to push their button anymore.
Yeah, it just felt like I was struggling with E12S, and you came in to help, and you said, "Chris, why don't you just give me your count information, your info, and I'll just clear phase 1 for you."
Just turn your stance on. You got this.
I'll just handle it. Why would you do that? Like, no, I said I want to learn how to do it, and I appreciate your help, but I'm not looking for you to do it for me. And so, like, I am trying to play a game here.
And that's the feeling you got when they took the tank
and that's
stance?
the two things I was mad about. Was I was mad on the front end for the changes to crafting and gathering, because I feel that crafting and gathering was a time sink, and so when they removed the time, there wasn't anything left over
my head.
And instead they came back and they added expert recipes. They added a thing to chase for people that wanted to go chase titles and then be mad that they spent the amount of time they spent. They added a whole bunch of stuff. So Crafters and Gatherers by the end got an enormous amount of content. I do ask that, like, if part of Crafters and Gatherers is restoration and there is no restoration, are they overall smaller? So as a separate conversation, I'm still not totally satisfied there without knowing more.
They had a temporary buff in what they had to do.
Right,
but
and so when the buff falls away, are we left less than we were pre-Shadowbringers? And so, like,
maybe we can hope Island Sanctuary has something to do with it. That would be cool.
Right, and so, like, on the 5th, the next live letter, hopefully they'll answer that. But for tank stance, the two concerns I had in Shadowbringers were tank stance and crafting and gathering. Going into Endwalker, tanks feel good. As a matter of fact, my only frustration with tanks was that the warrior gap closer felt like a homogenization where everybody else went up to 20 ohms and it went up to charges, as opposed to, I would have preferred it to still cost gauge, so I was encouraged to use it in my inner release window, because I think the fact that I was encouraged to use it in inner release felt, or specifically when I needed the gap, when I needed the timing, made it feel different, and I like tanks feeling different. And so as I look at the Gunbreaker here, it does feel different. It does feel different than the two tanks we've already talked about, Dark Knight and Paladin. It feels like I'm pressing more buttons. It feels
it's
like
very busy.
And
it's very busy.
And sometimes that's what you want. Sometimes you're like, I just want a job that feels faster.
That's why I like it.
And so
I like to be very busy when I'm doing things, because, like you said, tanking with tank stance changes, I can understand why they did it, and I'm not inherently against it. We got used to it, right?
Sure.
But it made tanking a little bit easier. It took some thought away from it. And a lot of the bosses this expansion, which again isn't inherently bad, they kind of position themselves, right? Like, a lot of bosses this time around put themselves in the middle.
Yeah, there's a lot of I didn't get it right, but he'll recenter in a second.
Yeah. and so that happens a lot. So it was kind of like like you said, we had our job taken away. They're coming like, let us do this for you, and you're
Yeah.
like, well, I want to do that though. What else am I doing here?
Right. Clearly, you can't manage enmity or centering a boss, so we're just going to handle it. It's like,
Yeah.
oh, well,
So
I guess.
maybe an Endwalker, now that they've changed things up and they've homogenized some of the more difficult aspects of our rotations, maybe we'll get some more of that tank and complexity back. Would be nice.
Yes.
And with the changes to our combos not breaking, that one is actually biggest for Gunbreaker than any other tank, I feel, because now there's going to be our situation where you have Bloodfest coming up and you're like, oh, do I use it now or not? You're gonna have a time where that lines up in your No Mercy, and you're gonna go into No Mercy with 3 cartridges and a Bloodfest ready, and you're just gonna wail on the boss, right? You're gonna hit continuation after continuation after continuation,
Right.
and you're gonna be in a combo. You're gonna be in the middle of a combo, and you're gonna not finish it. But now you're going to finish everything in your burst. You're still not going to complete your combo. No Mercy's going to end. Then you'll finish your combo.
And your combo's going to be waiting.
Now.
Yep. And so for a job that doesn't have a Requiescat combo where you're spamming Blade to end it, it doesn't have Inner Release, it doesn't have Delirium, right? Nope. They've effectively created the fact that those...
They've always had the original version of those, if you think about it, in the terms of gnashing every 30 seconds, because you don't use that continuation, you do lose it. You don't use the next part of gnashing, you do just lose it.
But it doesn't. So it didn't feel as berserk. Like it didn't feel as like insatiable rage. Like Inner Release feels like I'm just losing it, right? And gnashing is like it's a boxer that throws a haymaker every 10th punch. And so, like,
you're like chaining something together.
You're chaining something together, and it's always part of a repeating. Like, I'm gonna punch you again really hard in a second, and I'm gonna punch you again really hard in a second. But now you're absolutely right. There are these moments where, like, when Double Down is hitting, and when you're getting Bloodfested, you already had 3 cartridges up. There are moments where you're like, screw the combo, let's just go to town. And so I think Gunbreaker, if anything, my biggest complaint about Gunbreaker to date has been that the gun blades themselves don't have big enough chambers. I want them to look like a grenade launcher. And this makes me feel even more like when I have 3 cartridges in Bloodfest, like if I look at this way zoomed out, like why can't I see that? Because I feel like when you're hitting with Double Down and you're hitting with 3 cartridges, that feels like just a giant. So when you see those tiny little no, that is not representative of what's happening.
I think people want louder sound effects on what's happening. I think they want to hear the giant explosions.
Yeah, this needs to be.
You want to see it. You're just going full gunmetal. It's great.
Which is exciting to have a job where my biggest complaint is cosmetic, because I'm not a glamour is my end game guy, and so for my complaint to be cosmetic, that means Gunbreaker, from my perspective, is in a really good spot. And hearing you say, as somebody who's way on the high end of players, say it's a good spot, like this appeals to me as a casual player, and I could 100% recommend this tank as somebody's first.
It's my number one pick. It's my number one pick. I mean, Paladin I still think is going to be the progression tank, but Gunbreaker just looks so satisfying that I'm probably going to play that.
It's a lot of rotation for a new tank, so I would still suggest that you start with a Warrior or Paladin.
It is.
But you don't unlock it right away. So as a new player, start with a Warrior Paladin, and when you unlock Gunbreaker, you'll be good by then. And switch over. And so like I would still recommend it as a second tank, but
if you're not a new player but you're a new tank, like let's say you played Ninja, I think Gunbreaker's
going to be ready to go. You're ready to go. Yeah. Especially Ninja. My God.
60.
Did you touch the new Ninja? Did you press 65,000 buttons a minute?
I did watch somebody else press it, and they were doing. I heard them go, "Oh my God, I can't put everything in my burst." I mean, they were losing it.
Yeah, if you didn't do Mavis Beacon in grade school, you are not prepared for the new Ninja. Like it is 1,000 presses a minute. It's fast. So, yeah, I think Gunbreaker is going to feel really good. And for all the people who are going to go try Reaper for the first time and then realize, oh my God, Reaper queues suck, I want to try a tank, Gunbreaker is going to be a very natural suggestion.
It's going to be great. It's going to be great.
So, is there anything that you think Gunbreaker got worse at? Like, I feel like we offer bad things about Paladin and Dark Knight, and it feels like Gunbreaker all we've done is gush. Like, I feel like, is there anything that
Here is actually the part I would like to talk about. This is the part I wanted to say. For a long time now, since we knew Endwalker was coming, people said, Rin, what do you want to see change? Yeah. And I said, my hair. I nerfed myself because Gunbreaker got the number one change. They were like, "What do you expect to change out of Gunbreaker?" And I was like, "You know what? The job was released pretty perfectly. The only thing I could really think of that I would really even expect to want from Gunbreaker would be like a 2 cartridge ability and another defensive." And I was like, "That's all I would want, and that's all we got." We got a continuation on Burst Strike. That's a little extra, but we got a 2 cartridge button. We got a new ammo to support that, and we got our Heart of Corundum. We got everything I wanted. We got everything I wanted, and they didn't get nerfed. Looking things over, you know what? I'm sorry. That's misspeaking. That's misspeaking. They did have a few things nerfed. Let me talk on that real briefly.
Blasting Zone had a big reduction.
Sonic Break had a reduction as well. Its dot was 90 potency, now it's 60. Shock had a reduction because it also got 60 seconds on its dot.
Dots across the board went down, though. So just to put that in the context of every other job, I'm dots across the board seem to have gotten nerfed.
Strictly in the vacuum of what you would think the Gunbreaker's biggest abilities are. You're like, okay, do I use this or do I prioritize that? It looks like they brought Blasting Zone down to 600 potency, while Burst Strike is 400 with a continuation of 200. Before you prioritized Blasting Zone over any other GCD because it was the strongest thing you can hit.
Yeah.
Now you're going to have another option if you're like, do I clip this for that? Now you're like, okay, I'll actually do the Burst Strike because it's neutral now. So they kind of alleviated that change, right? But in terms of other potencies, like all of the reductions are pretty much just in line with the stat squish and melee changes.
The physical changes.
Nothing is really a nerf outside of Blasting Zone, Sonic Break, and Shock. But we received Double Down, which is stronger than any of those. You could think of Double Down actually as our old Sonic Break. A total of 1200 potency, just Double Down just does it, which is great. So
it's
no
exciting.
Complaints there.
It's exciting.
Very
Give me a big gunblade with giant grenade-sized cartridges on it.
Okay.
To glamour. And
maybe a Garlean one, right?
I mean, I hear
they've got a big gun somewhere, right? Why not
move it in one of those cars? They got cars. So yeah, give me a big grenade launcher like you.
Maybe that'll be the Dragon Song ultimate weapon. Giant grenade launcher blade.
Giant grenade launcher blade. Because in general, that's one of my frustrations is that for how much boom the job has, literally some of the gunblades are just tiny. Like you just got this little little pistol with like a stick, like a little toothpick on the end of it hanging off the back of you.
It's noisy cricket.
And meanwhile, like Dark Knights get Buster Swords, Paladins have shields, and like Warriors have comically large axes, and mine runs around with a hammer. And then they've got this tiny little blade that, like, if you zoom in, might have, like, a gun component to it. Like, come on, guys. Yep. But, like, that's the best I can come up with as a complaint about Gunbreaker. And that's not a very strong complaint. Like, I'm not a cosmetic-driven player. I appreciate it, but, like, that's not my go-to. I'd rather focus on new mechanics than cosmetics. I'm not one of those go-to ask about the glamour dresser. That's not my go-to question. I really don't have a lot of complaints here.
You know what? Actually, one of my worries, and this happened to Warrior, when Stormblood moved into Shadowbringers, Warrior stopped using AoE on 2 targets with their Decimate because Felcleave was stronger, right? That's not the case here. You're still going to use Fated Circle. You're still going to AoE combo, and that to me is awesome. I'm really happy. Well, actually, that's not inherently true. Fated Circle's 290 potency times 2 is 580, so you would Burst Strike continuation. But your regular Demon Slice, Demon Slaughter, I think you'll still do that.
I'm excited. Cool. I'm sure there are going to be people frustrated with the PvP to action adjustment to Gnashing Fang, but I think having 2 buttons that on their own don't get used, meanwhile you have another button that doesn't get used before, like having 3 buttons that all only each get used in sequence once every, it's just a waste of space.
I think controller players super happy about it. Or players that just maybe they get lost pressing a bunch of buttons. Just big quality of life. Big quality of life.
Right. And they added the complexity back elsewhere. You know, you've talked about, for people that want to master the skill ceiling, pushing them in sequence already wasn't hard. And so they pulled that out for them, and they get to replace it with optimization that's going to be well above my head. So
anybody can do it. Anyone can do it. I know you can.
optimization is well above my head, but I can wait until I can go watch your video, which tells me what the optimization is, and then I can chase that. Because this game is absolutely Guitar Hero while playing Dance Dance Revolution. And so once I know the song,
sure.
I can play any song on Guitar Hero, given that I can practice it over and over and over. I can't sight read any song, but given that I can play it over and over, I can learn any song. And so the rotations in this game are absolutely Guitar Hero. The fights are absolutely Dance Dance Revolution. And once you know those two things, like, you're just playing Dance Dance while playing Guitar Hero. So what impresses me is that people do that, but like, you can get there.
That's
I'm
true,
not
but
there yet.
I'm excited.
But
I'm excited.
Yeah.
I think the number one thing we're also going to see in terms of, so you were talking about skill floors and skill ceilings in terms of like being approachable. I think we're probably going to see something easier for players who are good at repetition. Like, they're going to have a much easier time to just sync everything up with their team, right? But if somebody gets a little lost and they're like, where was I in my rotation again? And you delay something by even a few seconds and you do that every time, you're going to permanently, now that everything's like 60 and 2 minute, right? You're just going to permanently be desynced with the rest of your party. That we're probably going to see more punishment on in terms of the public view, like Party Finder. You're going to notice, you're like, oh, that person used chain stratagem late or trick late, and then we know that it's late now for literally the rest of the fight. And that's
especially
gonna
pulling their own parses in a Party Finder where they are expecting a buff from somebody. So I don't know that that's a Gunbreaker specific thing, but somebody who offers a party buff, they're like, your buff is out of sync with me because I'm perfect, you are trash.
Like, let's say you wanted to use your inner release and you're like, all right, I'm going to press it now because my next button's a fell cleave and Trick's going to go up, and then you press it and you look up and Trick's not there and you're like, oh.
Right. You're looking at that flying text and you're like, that number's not as big as it should be. Which is going to feel even worse when people see how small the new numbers are. I think I didn't notice. I felt good in the dungeon. I felt good on, when
I felt great.
I felt great.
Okay,
but
numbers
when
are
you're
way
at numbers,
smaller.
They are way smaller.
That's fine. That's fine because you can
Health is way
digest a lot more of the information on your screen, right? Like, if everybody was doing hundreds of thousands of damage and that's flying everywhere, you're going to be like,
right.
What am I looking at?
Unless we're going to start having scientific notation, it starts to get hard. Like,
right.
Show me everything with a to the fourth, please. Like, what am I supposed to do with this?
I think. Do you remember what was your fell cleave hitting for? Like 10, like maybe like 20,000 at most. I think so. It's reasonable and it's still nice. It's still big.
It's still big, especially when you compare it to your total life pool, which is really how I think of things relative, right? Like what I love is when a job does so much damage, you're like, it's a good thing that's hitting you. Because if I hit myself, that would have killed me. And so knowing that, like, a double down, you're like, oh god, good thing I'm not getting double down. Like, that wouldn't feel good at all.
I'd be screwed. It is really nice.
Yeah, good. I'm glad you're happy. I'm ready to talk about Warrior.
More than happy. Warrior. Now we're done. We don't. Yeah, we don't have to talk about Warrior. Yeah, because it sucks. Nah, I'm just kidding.